G'day. So I'm Chris, and I work for SilverStripe, working on the SilverStripe framework. Hoping to bring out SilverStripe 4 Beta 1 in the next month or so. And my talk will be about what to look out for, and I'm trying to get you guys more excited so you can actually jump into it, and so you can find bugs for me to fix. More work. So yeah, a little bit about myself. I work for the Open Sorcerers team. Our GitHub is called Open Sausages, mainly because Open Sorcerers was taken by I think it was Belgium team before us. So I work on the framework and CMS, mostly in JavaScript, but of course I have to use PHP as well. I like to create puns. If you look at my pull requests, the branches will always be some sort of pun. So a good example is where art thou file, for fixing a bug where a file goes missing. So I'm a family man. I got a little son who's up to no good every day. And just this morning, he had a #1 explosion, which was not a very pleasant experience for my wife, because I was just about to leave for the airport. And of course, I must put the obligatory, I like ice cream. If you manage to find my house and access the Wi-Fi on my house, the password's right there. You're more than welcome to try. So, what would I cover? I would like to cover all the features that come in SilverStripe 4. Unfortunately, that'll take me like a week of meetups probably. So I'm just going to cover the ones that I'm most excited about. I'll give you reasons for why those features are coming, and some not so good parts about it, but you can ignore that part because I'm trying to get you excited. So there is a bit of word of warning. Like I said, I only touched some of the features. There's so many features that I've written, I think, 5 alpha release blog posts about different features coming out, and it's a really long list. So feel free to check those out for more details as well. So our CEO, Sam, has said, there are so many changes, and I paraphrase his quote, there's a lot of yak shaving going on here. So yak shaving means lots of work, and it's really hard work because imagine trying to shave a yak. And throughout the process, we've found a lot of to-dos, ancient to-dos. Like in this screenshot, you can see 9 years old, even 10 years old. And all it was a to-do saying, write this function, we need it eventually. But evidently, 10 years passed and we didn't need it. So I chosen 4 features I wanted to cover. So the first one I thought was very important was the user experience of using the CMS. So this covers a little bit about accessibility, but mostly trying to impress people and convince them to change from 3 to 4 in a way that they can ignore all the problems they run along the way during their upgrade. Yeah, I'm not sounding very convincing, am I?
I like realism.
So the other big feature I like is namespaces. It's been a long time coming. I've been using namespaces I think 2 years before I joined SilverStripe, so 4 years ago. And when I came to SilverStripe, started using the CMS, I was like, hang on, why aren't you guys using namespaces? This is really, well, archaic in a way. And then, so SilverStripe at the moment in version 3 uses jQuery. we've made a big decision to jump away from jQuery. So there's a big cleanup in the JavaScript section. And lastly, SilverStripe is no longer just a CMS. You can use it as an actual framework like Laravel can. Of course, at the moment, it's relatively choppy, but we got there. You can actually cut out the CMS part of it, and it would just be the framework with all the other functionality that you would expect from SilverStripe. So the first one is UX. So we wanted to make the interface more intuitive. So we don't want to put buttons hidden in the bottom right corner. We want to make them a bit more obvious for you to see that it's a save button right there. We've changed our process on how to implement features now. Rather than go, here's a feature, we want it, go and develop it, Damien. Now, Damien has to actually talk to our front-end designer, UX person, and he has to work with UX, which kind of put him in a difficult spot because he hates front-end. He just loves PHP. But in doing that process, we found that we were able to iterate our changes as opposed to one big bang, here's the feature. We could actually say, okay, we'll ease in the feature bit by bit and gradually get to the final stage that we want to. And that let us go to continuous improvement where we were halfway through implementing that feature. And then we say, hang on, maybe this way would be better. We're getting a lot of users saying that we're going another way than what we actually planned. And the biggest feature we had from SilverStripe 3 to 4 was there's no more gradient backgrounds. You don't get this fading from light to black, light to dark kind of shading on everything. It's all flat surfaces now. There we go. So this is a screenshot of SilverStripe 4. It's a lot more leaner. It's not as in your face, well, hopefully. And we've tried to upgrade not just the icon and background, but also this is the files management area. We're no longer using grid field. We're actually using proper icons for images and files. Yay. Yeah, so like I said, we found that if we planned before we implemented, we didn't have to go through a whole lot of headaches of revisiting it and fixing things that we wouldn't have caught anyway. So we just go bit by bit and then fix it as we go along, as opposed to, here you go, here's the feature, surprise. I think we did that in 3.1 to 3.2, but since then we've tried to avoid doing that. So we found some features that really made no sense to be there. When I was writing these slides, I couldn't think of anything to bring up to illustrate that, and I still can't think of anything that I can bring up to illustrate what I mean by doesn't make sense, and now we're trying to make it to make sense. But maybe at the end of the night, you can approach me and I'll finally go, aha, here it is. But for now, sorry, I can't think of anything. Yep, so this also meant that Paul had to work a lot harder and reshuffle all our CSS files. Thank God I work in Auckland and he works in Wellington, and I can't hear any swearing from him, so it's all good. Yeah, so a few gotchas with the UX first approach was that, well, for us as a team, there was a higher barrier to entry. We couldn't just go, oh yeah, let's go for it and do it. We actually had to bounce the ideas off Paul and sometimes Sam, just to get their approval and say, okay, that's a good UX idea, let's go with it. Back then, we could just go, oh, we like this feature, let's go put it in. And it was in. And that took a lot of time. I think a few stories we had took us up to a week of discussions just to get through. And that was just discussions to get it started. So the next feature was namespaces. Namespaces was almost a staple for me when I moved to PHP. Vendors used it, so you could have the same class of the same name, and it wouldn't matter because they were in different namespaces. You won't get errors like, oh, this class has already been defined. You can't define it again. PHP will just cry and stop working. So we're finally moving to namespaces in SilverStripe. We're following PSR4 standards, so you can find the class file that you need if you want to ever go through the SilverStripe source code. And with the namespaces, we were able to separate a lot of the classes into their meaningful functions. So we put all the file management classes into assets namespace, and we put all the bootstrapping and core classes into a core namespace, etc. There's too many to name. So one of the biggest reasons that we did namespaces was we had one client who loved blogs, and so they installed 2 blog modules onto their SilverStripe installation. The fun thing was both of them used the word blog page as their class, and because both of them used blog page, it clashed, and PHP went, nah, I'm not going to work with this. I don't know which one to use. So the client ended up choosing to fork one of the blog modules and then rename that class to something else. And that led to a lot more maintenance issues down the road. I think they had 2 instances where they couldn't upgrade the fork because it caused a whole lot of conflicts during the process of upgrading. So along with PSR4 comes the autoloader, and that meant a lot faster loading with PHP classes. So you'll notice when you jump to SilverStripe 4, the performance is a lot more snappier. You can actually jump between pages, and it won't take, I think it was 4 seconds to load one page. We've cut that down to like half a second or something along those lines. So it's a lot more responsive nowadays. So one of the things that I noticed when I jumped into SilverStripe 3 was people loved, well, at least my teams loved to create multiple classes in one file. And that caused a lot of headaches for me, trying to follow, okay, so there's a page, and then there's a page controller underneath that hidden right down at the bottom of the file. How am I supposed to find the page controller or know that it exists? I think I spent a day trying to find it, and eventually found it when my teammate said, oh, have you looked at the page PHP file? And my answer was, yes, I did, and didn't see anything. And he goes, I mean, at the very bottom of the page file. And that's where I learned, wow, you guys actually put multiple classes in a PHP file, which really astounded me. So we're no longer doing that in SilverStripe framework, at least. So there's a few caveats. So one of the problems we had with namespaces was that the top page class couldn't belong to a namespace. we've had, I think, a 2-week discussion between everyone who was involved in the issue on the GitHub page, and everyone had a different opinion on how to handle a page class namespace. It came to the consensus as we're not going to namespace the page class. We're going to leave it to you guys to decide, but please keep a class named page without a namespace, and SilverStripe will work with that. So one of the biggest problems I've had since jumping to SilverStripe 4 was you need to always use composer update to update the file references to the classes that you're using. If you create a new class, you do need to do a composer auto dump command to update the autoloader. And that caught me a few times where I'm wondering, why is this not working? I've added the class, and then I go, oh, that's why I need to update the autoloader. Of course, I'm going to cry about this, but you guys can still do multiple classes in one PHP file. I won't stop you, but I'll just go in the corner and cry a little bit if I hear anything like that. OK, so JavaScript cleanup. This was one of many battles. I think the guy that was working on this before me wrote a 70-page document on why we should leave jQuery and jump to React, which I didn't read. I'll be honest, I didn't read it. But when I got the summary too long didn't read part, it made sense, and I was like, OK, let's go on board with that.
Can you share that document?
Yep, it's open. You guys can see it. I'll find a link and I'll share it if you're interested. Yeah, so we introduced React. That allowed us to create unit tests, and we're following the Airbnb coding standards in JavaScript. Yeah, so we got a list of reasons why we didn't really want to keep jQuery. We found it almost impossible to unit test. It relied heavily on a DOM object, which makes it very slow to run unit tests. jQuery has a lot of side effects, and when you got a 4,000-line JavaScript file, it becomes unpredictable on what it's doing. We have found that Entwine is very difficult to upgrade, especially because the main person who took care of Entwine has run off to Thailand to help a startup company, and we haven't heard from him since. And that was August last year. Yeah. Yeah, so Entwine is no longer actively maintained. I think we have passed the question along among the team members and say, look, do you want to take ownership of this, of Entwine? And not one of us wants to put our hand up. So when we moved to React, we found it brought along a lot of predictability in the code, especially with unit tests, where we could actually isolate the components in the React code and test the different parts out easily. We did upgrade the React version at least once, maybe twice, and we found no problems upgrading it. It was a few tweaks here and there where they upgraded their standards and we needed to follow the standards a bit more. Yeah, so the biggest gotcha with using React is the high barrier to entry. We were really concerned about jumping into React at first because if anyone was wanting to contribute and wasn't familiar with React, how would they actually start? And we're still running into that issue internally, where we needed to spend a fair amount of time just to help them on board and start using React. So that's still an issue, and we're still looking into how we can make this easier. And yeah, of course, React is quite new to SilverStripe. We're still building the infrastructure for it. We're switching from, say, RESTful API to GraphQL, and that was an amazing step, but at the same time, it's quite new and people are not very familiar with it, so contributions are quite low at the moment. And yeah, we have found that GraphQL is quite solid, but we have found also that React is not very flexible with extensibility, so how are you going to customize those React components for another developer outside SilverStripe? We're actually tackling this right now, and we're still running through a few proof of concepts on how this can work. And of course, I'm guilty of this. Unit tests have caught me breaking a few things along the way. That's actually a good thing, but it does frustrate me that I broke something. So the biggest feature I like about SilverStripe 4 is that it's not just a CMS anymore. You can actually just use SilverStripe framework, and I've got a demo at the end of this to illustrate that. You can remove the pages section and not have any of the site tree classes in your installation if you wanted. In my demo, I've removed the CMS part and the asset admin, so all you get is a security pane showing a list of users. And yeah, in that framework installation, you still have access to everything that you need that's core to SilverStripe. The most important ones are the data object to access your database, and templates to actually generate the HTML files that, for the user. Yeah, so the main reason we broke out a lot of these, I guess, bulk functionality out of framework was because we wanted framework to be much easier to maintain. We want, say, if we wanted to update one particular code, we don't want to have to update framework along with that sometimes. So we're aiming to have, say, if we want to rework the whole assets section, then we can just update the assets module as opposed to updating framework, because framework works fine by itself. We don't need to update that so much. And of course, in doing so, we've actually made framework less of a god. I think in the past, there were, even in SilverStripe 3, but not as much as 2, framework was essentially a god package, all in one. You can't really pick and choose what not to include. So the biggest caveat we found with this was if we wanted to add a new feature, we're still having to do multiple changes across different modules. I do think that in the future, as we keep going along this path, that'll go less and less, and as our API matures, you only need to update the module that you need to update, as opposed to having to update framework as well as the module that you're looking at. And we have found during hack days that people didn't know which module to report the bugs they found. Most of the time, we've just suggested, raise the issue in framework, and we'll triage it into the proper module later on, which seems to be helping them at least raise the bug, and so we're aware of it. But it does mean a bit more grunt work from us to actually triage everything. And we found that Travis, our continuous integration, has been hammered quite heavily. It has a limit of, I think, 10 concurrent tests running at the same time. And because of all those modules and pull requests that we were creating, there's been a few times where we're twiddling our thumbs waiting for the test to pass so that we can actually merge those into the module to get that going. So as I mentioned, there's so many changes in SilverStripe 4. Well, as a question to everyone, has anyone used it before or tried SilverStripe 4? No? That's cool. It's still in alpha, so I don't blame anyone for not jumping on board now. We are aiming for a beta release next month sometime, and we're hoping that people would start jumping on board when it goes to beta. That's when we're going to API freeze everything, and you won't get unexpected changes like, oh, function does not exist, or class does not exist anymore. That's when beta will mean those classes are there and they're going to stay. So yeah, I was going to ask, what's your favorite feature? But that's all right. Have a look through the blog post if you feel like it. I'm on Slack. I'm keen to hear if any one of you have a favorite feature that you like or would like in SilverStripe 4 before the beta release. We've still got a long list of features that we want to get in, but of course, with time limit, we're trying to cut that down. But if you convince me that it's a feature that must come in before beta, I can work my hardest to convince our product owner to get this in before beta. Cool. So I'll show a demo of SilverStripe 4 without the CMS or assets. So this is a bare bones framework of SilverStripe. Let's see. That's not helpful. Where's it going? Okay, so so this is the composer JSON of the SilverStripe bare bones installation. You can see, if I can find my mouse, you can see an admin section. So that gives us the ability to go into the admin and actually see like the whole sections that we're going to install. Assets is just for handling files. We could actually get rid of that and it'll still work fine. And of course, core is framework. And everything else is just so that I'm on the latest version of whatever I'm using, as opposed to needing it. You could actually safely well, not sure about admin, but at least remove all of these and just leave framework and admin. And that's fine. It'll actually be happy with that and work with that. But to illustrate what I'm doing, I will need those in there. And when I go into the admin section, let's see, make this bigger. This is all that you can see in the admin. A security with users and groups, and a settings for the site-wide config, and that's all. So the pages section has been removed, and the file management or assets section has been removed as well. And to illustrate that, we can actually add the asset admin back in. It's the wrong console. So I'm just re-adding the asset admin back in, waiting for composer prop. I'm not sure how fast the public Wi-Fi is, so. But yeah, when that finishes, and for the public viewing section of my website, stop jumping, thank you. All I've done is told SilverStripe, okay, for all my public interaction, go to this controller, and that's to this to-do controller, and that's all it needs to do. The controller will handle everything else, and this is a way to build a single page app if you really wanted to with SilverStripe. Right, and so all that controller does is print out this template. So all the template does is go to-do list as a title and my custom body for the public. And if I actually go to that website, all it'll do is do my custom body for a public. And it'll handle any URL except for admin. So if I go, it'll still be just that template. So this is a way to do a single page app in SilverStripe 4 without all the fluff of a CMS. And I guess lastly, yep, so that's all done. And there we go. That adds the file management back into our CMS, well, into SilverStripe. And we can go ahead and use it as we like. And there we go. That's SilverStripe 4 for you.